They raised us well, gave us everything they had, being public servants, so that I understand. I understand what it is to experience lack.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Schuster. Food for the brain, knowledge from the experts, tools to win at life. I'm your host, Dr. Richard. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, and whatever you do, this is the show that is going to help you become the best version of yourself. Each episode, you will hear from some of the most amazing, talented, and successful people on the planet who followed their passions and strive to help others. Join our movement to get 1 million people each day to commit acts of kindness for others. Together, we're going to make the world a better place. Are you ready? Because it's time for your Daily Helping. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Daily Helping Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard, and we have a fascinating and exceptional guest to share with you today. His name is Dozy Mmobuosi. He is an author and technology entrepreneur. He founded Tingo Mobile PLC, Africa's first mobile device manufacturer and IoT business. He's also the founder of Tingo Mobile UK, Tingo Mobile USA, Tingo Remit, and Tingo Airlines. His expertise cuts across technology, banking, energy, and telecommunications. He's led Tingo's growth to more than $600 million in annual revenue and holds a PhD in rural advancement from UPM Malaysia. Dozy, welcome to the Daily Helping. It is awesome to have you with us today.
Thanks, Dr. Richard, and I'm glad to be on this show.
This is going to be cool. So you've accomplished so much, but one of the things I love to do with my guests is to kind of hop in the time machine and go back and really discover your journey, what put you on the path that you're doing today. And I know you've got a neat one. So take us back and take us through that.
Okay, maybe I should start with how I started my journey. I started business at the age of 16. I started by, selling used clothes in Lagos. And, when I got into the university at 16, I became a show promoter. So my show promotion experience got me in touch with several brands, some of them multinationals. So I gained some experiences meeting corporates for sponsorships, so with that experience, I thought, let me start along those lines. So when I graduated, my first degree in 2001, I went to my father and I told him, look, this is what I want to do. I do not expect to start looking for any job anywhere. What I did was we started by doing e-publishing. We had also built a social network platform called Niger Fans. I'll fast forward to when the telcos, the likes of MTN, Econet Wireless at that time came to Nigeria. So I jumped in on an opportunity I saw. Mobile phones were very expensive at that time. So I knew that, look, ringtones and, caller tunes would be, a bit interesting and not too difficult to do. And I had access to Nigerian musical celebrities. So I reached out to some of them and said, I want to start producing ringtones. And, so from e-publishing to ringtones and caller tunes, then that became too boring for me. So one of the things that fascinated me was, the cost of mobile phones in Nigeria at that time. They were just too ridiculously expensive. So I found something in that. There was a gap I felt I could fill. So what I did was to start bringing in, or rather sending out cheap mobile devices, to Nigeria as our business, at that time. So what changed my life really was when I went to Shenzhen in China. I got there and I saw how mobile devices were being produced. That was really fascinating. And I knew, look, there's almost nothing impossible to achieve. So I went back home, went to Nigeria and met with some of my partners at that time. One of them, my father. I said, look, there's a possibility, to bring what I saw in Shenzhen into Nigeria, where we can, I don't call it full production, but where we can at least assemble smartphones. So yeah, it sounded interesting, but one, we needed to create a niche market because we didn't have the resources at that time to compete with the likes of Samsung and Nokia and the big brands at that time, and of course even Apple. So what I did was I looked at the various sectors from media, transport, and the agri sector. I realized that a sector that needed all the help via technology is the agri sector, the agribusiness sector. There are millions of undocumented agribusiness owners, both small, medium, and large-scale farmers. We do not have a single bank branch in my village as of now. So it is clear that you must bring financial services to the rural communities in Nigeria. And the fastest way to deploy services is through technology. So what we did was to partner a certain bank. And after doing all the entire data capture, we knew that the first thing to do was to make smartphones available to these farmers, because we had 2G and 3G technology in these rural, places at that time. So we eventually raised funds and set up an assembly line in Abuja and one in Lagos. And of course, making sure that each of these devices had a mobile wallet, which these farmers would use to do their transactions. That has been our journey to an extent. So we conquered the smartphone beats to rural Nigeria, for rural farmers, provided fintech, by planning and implementing access to financial services. That's basically financial inclusion, down to marketplace, because you cannot you can't provide them with all these things and then they don't have a structured market to sell. So what we have done is we have built a platform called Nwasa. But it's beyond building a platform. It has to be a platform that works, where the farmer earns money, we also earn money, values added. But as we have built this whole ecosystem for our farmers, that is the sell side. We are now at the stage where we are working on the buy side, where regular Nigerian, living in both the cities and rural parts of Nigeria can buy produce, on our platform through any of our channels and, get credit in terms of loans, and loans are not readily available in Nigeria. So we are not just looking at serving farmers and, people on our base, but we're now creating value so that our own customers have more sales. Of course, we also make more money, So we have seen ourselves walk through those value-added services down to even opening up financial technology products to the general public. We want to be that company that would keep to democratize access to technology, access to finance, insurance, pensions, So we are that channel where, if you have a brilliant idea and you think you can partner us, we can help distribute from pensions to insurance to financial services, because we built a platform that is trusted by the rural people of Nigeria and, of course, by extension, Africa.
Hey guys, Dr. Richard here. For the past 7 years, I've been privileged to bring you incredible guests who are changing the world and can help you become the best version of yourself. I'm really excited to share with you a new quiz that I created based on my clinical training that will curate for you a custom list of my top episodes and actionable strategies to help you wherever you are on your journey. All you need to do is go to drrichardschuster.com to take it, and it's 100% free. You'll be taking the next step on the journey to unlocking the power of you, and I can't wait to see where you'll go. I think this is so fascinating, and there's a ton to unpack there. One, you got your start as a show promoter, and now here you are as such a change agent, I'm the first to admit that you've given me a grand education on the economics of Nigeria and the farmers, but you've basically brought cell phone technology to Nigeria. You have democratized access to finances and credit and things that we take for granted in the United States and the Western world. You've brought that to Nigeria. And you said, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, you don't just build technology for the sake of building it. But I gathered from that impact is vitally important to you personally and to your company. I'd love for you to take some time and talk about your why. Talk about that, why that impact matters.
Okay, you know why it matters to me? I've well-traveled, possibly been to over 50 countries. I have seen the West. I live in the West even today. I have seen how things happen, from credit, but back home, if I wanted to buy a house, there are no mortgages for me to do so. If I wanted to buy, you won't find credit. And you see the large corporates, I won't mention their names, when they arrive in Nigeria, they're only, selling to the people in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, in Abuja, selling to the very upwardly mobile people, living in the cities. Then again, you find companies that provide maybe satellite, broadband, mobile phones. It just doesn't make sense if people who earn less than $5 a day are not being considered in the scheme of things. So, so who takes care of them? Who provides them smartphones? Who provides them credit? Who provides them affordable internet? So I'm that person who has said, look, we have to build value and provide services to these people who have not been remembered. Recently, I had a meeting with one of the biggest satellite broadband providers, and I said, look, I want to partner you in Nigeria. How can we go about this? It's costing hundreds of dollars to sign up to that service. $500, for instance, that is the amount to pay for, to get connected. The average villager will not earn that in 6 months. So for me, it's about catering to that market. And in Nigeria, you're looking at it's over 70% of the market, that we'll be addressing by making sure that we provide access to technology, to finance, because someone has to remember them, and that's where Tingo comes. That's where we come in here. For us, it's about creating value for those who, have been forgotten. I'd rather sell to 20, 30 million people and earn something little, but, earning maybe $5 from 30 million people, that gives me $150 million, for instance. So I focus more on the volume, transaction volume. Yes, there are micro transactions, but, when you look at it critically, you have done more than even the large corporates, because everyone is focusing on servicing, the big corporations, middle class people. But how many middle class people do we have in Africa? How many large corporates do we have in Africa? So I'm not interested in those people or in those corporates. I'm interested in having forgotten those who earn very little money, because I know that there is a way to produce affordable technology, affordable services, and sell to them, and inspire them, help them grow their businesses. We see ourselves in that aspect as a device as a service business, not a mobile phone business selling mobile phones. No, it's a device as a service. So what we are doing is enabling them to do money transfers, to buy insurance, to buy pensions, to access markets, So the mobile phone is just basically like an enabler. It's their mobile bank. It's the bank that has not come to their village. But with your smartphone and you have access to even ordinary 2G technology, you can do anything on Tingo.
Amazing. And it's the impact. It's that you're bringing this technology to so many people that would otherwise not have access to it. And I know that you've also recently launched a foundation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay. My foundation, which is named after me, Dozy Mmobuosi Foundation, I actually I'm surprised you already know about that. I launched it on the 2nd of January this year, though I set it up in December. The idea behind that is to give back. Yes, I have built a company that is very successful. We've been through our trials. I know what it is I know the meaning of injustice. I know the meaning of hunger, because there was a time in my life, I think when I was in school, doing my first degree, where, I lost all my money, and, I just didn't want to go back home, but I lost all my money. I know what it is. So when I go out there and I see people who lack, the very basic things of life, I just know that, look, someone has to remember them in a positive way. I do not intend to make a lot of noise about the work we are doing or we want to start doing. What I did on that day was to, celebrate. I didn't want to throw a large party or a gala night. I wanted to celebrate with kids in very deprived parts of Lagos State, where I was born. So I was born in Lagos State. So I thought, let me start from Lagos, where I was born. I was born into a middle-class family. They were middle class at that time. So I didn't want to go to the neighborhood where I was born. So I went to the very deprived areas at Jegunle, some very neighborhoods where you can't even, step into. So we did a mobile party, give them food, gifts, try to ascertain the situation on ground there, because my foundation focuses on Africa. African leaders and African people must begin to engage in critical. Britain, number 10, is not going to solve our problem. Washington, D.C., the White House is not going to solve our problems. So we understand our problems better than the West. So we have to begin to solve our problems ourselves. And, African problems actually have African solutions. So the idea for me is to focus, one, on education, two, on healthcare. We have, on education, we have schools that are not our schools back home. You don't find the right chairs, the right environment, as little as chairs, tables, even proper uniforms, meals in schools. These things do not exist there. So one of the things we want to do is, one, train the teacher, provide the right tools for both teachers and students to learn in the right environment. Begin to introduce technology into these schools, be public or private. The public schools will be our first target. But again, I know that in Nigeria, it's usually not easy supporting public institutions, because the bureaucracy there, they have budgets. Again, you have the issue of corruption. There's corruption everywhere in the world, but back home, it's a bit difficult to help, because some of them would prefer not to get the help. But again, I'm going to use this platform to appeal to public servants to accept help coming from me or from any other person, because we need to start building the future of Nigeria, and the kids we are raising or training in those schools cannot compete if they don't have the right environment to do so. I'll leave the education part at that. Healthcare. What I've done with healthcare is, I've set up a company called Equity Vaccines. Equity Vaccines is going to be addressing just two simple kinds of vaccines, malaria vaccines and COVID-19 vaccines. So in partnership with pharmaceutical companies, even here in the UK, And in the US, where, of course, where, Tingo is headquartered these days, I'm looking at seeing how we can begin to produce vaccines locally in Nigeria. And of course, we know what that means. It means that there will be fairness in terms of distributing, vaccines. Here in the West, I stroll into America, everyone is vaccinated. Here in the UK, everyone vaccinated. You can't, the UK and the US and Switzerland, Germany, the West generally cannot fight COVID-19 in isolation. It has to be an all-out war. Everyone in Africa, yes, we have leaders in Africa, but we understand that we don't have the infrastructure. If the Nigerian government were to order vaccines, clearly we might end up using all of our foreign exchange reserve if we were to order and make sure that it reaches, the almost 200 million people. Then it means that we'll be depleting our reserve. So there is the issue of responsibility. I think we should be our brother's keeper, whether we're white or black. We need to fight this together. Vaccines must be everywhere. So I don't need to wait for number 10 or the White House to do that. So as an African, as a Nigerian, I think we need to start doing that ourselves and instead partner pharmaceuticals and those who are genuinely willing to do so. So it brings me down to funding. I am not, for instance, soliciting funding from anybody. I have pledged 5% of all of that. I run a very profitable business, and our company is a reporting company. We report to the SEC, and there are very good days ahead. So from what I own today, funding this myself, the pharmaceutical business, which is equity vaccines, will make money through the sale of vaccines. It will put that money back into the system. Also in terms of going back to education, we have a number of programs lined up, to help support students. And one other thing I'm doing, the university I did my first degree in Ambrose Ali University, supporting them with a faculty building, and I want to make myself available, share my experiences and begin to see how small businesses out of Nigeria, out of Africa can become global businesses.
That's fantastic. You mentioned there was a point in your life where you knew hunger, where you lost all your money. Share that story with us.
Okay, before I started getting sponsors for my concerts and all the other kinds of shows I did on campus back in my university days, I used to use my own money. Money I had earned during holidays. Selling used clothes. Call it at that time 350,000 naira. You put that. No student had 350,000 naira of his own at that time. Only me and maybe a few other people.
And what again does that translate to into US dollars?
Let me use at that time. It must have been $4,000. So I would, get the biggest artists. At that time, I knew some of them one-on-one. I would get them, bring them to the university. Sell tickets. But this particular time, it didn't work out. Rain and the rain factor, and so the weather spoiled the whole plan. So I did not factor that, and it was unexpected. So, and I was still learning the business too at that time. So I had nothing. I couldn't go home because even the money is given to me by my parents, I had put into this, hoping to make some money, and so for at least 2 months, I would eat maybe once in a. So what was I eating? Maybe noodles, and I would just put raw noodles in water, soak it, but I didn't have gas. Eat it, and then go to classes and come back. Face my stomach on my bed, my stomach facing the bed. So I knew what hunger meant. Just it was temporary, but the university is in a village. So when I take a walk, I see villagers who are hungry. So I know. So at that time, what I would do, anytime I had anything, I would share it with them. And I have made sure that I protected my mindset, knowing full well that not all fingers, the way we say it back home, not all fingers are equal. So you might be, fortunate to have some money to take care of yourself, but there are millions of people out there who do not have, the kind of, access to money or, money that you have. So it has to go around. So talking about hunger, it was very temporary for me. And now I remember too, growing up, my mother was a civil servant, that she worked for the government. And there were months where, salaries were not paid. And I'm sure we went through some level of hardship, if not for monies earned by my father. And certain times, if my father wasn't paid, my mother was paid. So there was a time in our history, when we experienced some level of lack, so I understand what it means. I understand what it means not to earn a living wage, a wage that can put food on the table, that can send your kids to school, that can pay hospital bills, so that I totally understand. It wouldn't be fair on my parents if I say it here that they didn't give me the best they did, but I knew that there are millions of people out there who did not at that time did not have access to even the little I had. But they raised us well, gave us everything they had, being public servants. So that I understand. I understand what it is to experience lack.
Thank you for sharing that. And we have talked about some really interesting things, and we're at time. Clearly, you are making a remarkable difference in Nigeria and Africa at large. Dozy, as you know, I wrap up all of my episodes by asking my guest a single question, and that is, what is your biggest helping? The one most important piece of information you'd like somebody to walk away with after hearing our conversation today?
Well, one thing I would like to say to everyone is, especially entrepreneurs who are watching this show, when you are create something that solves the problem. So I think that's what I want to leave it at, where I want to leave it at. Let's not just create for the sake of it. Let's remember that there are billions of people, possibly, who need solutions, who have problems that need solving. So let's create, not because we live in a society where there is abundance of ice cream, chocolates. I'm referring to England, America. The ice cream industry in America, for instance, is bigger than the very serious industries back home in Africa. So while we are, licking the ice cream in New York or in Maryland or in DC, wherever we will be in America or in the UK, let's remember that there is a child somewhere who will not taste ice cream ever until maybe he begins to earn some money and will be able to risk it. But let's just remember that. That's all I have to say.
Well said. Dozy, where can people learn more about you and your company?
Our website is tingoinc.com. Yeah, and then, of course, for me, you can go to Dozy Mmobuosi Foundation.com to see what we are doing with our foundation.
Fantastic. And we will have the links to all of that in the show notes at thedailyhelping.com. Well, Dozy, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I loved it.
Thanks, Dr. Richard, for having me.
Absolutely. And I want to thank each and every one of you who tuned into this episode. If you like what you heard, go give us a follow on Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review, because that is what helps other people find the show. But most importantly, go out there today and do something nice for somebody else, even if you don't know who they are, and post it in your social media feeds using the hashtag #MyDailyHelping, because the happiest people are those that help others.